Yasmin is a former UX designer turned digital well-being advocate, exploring the relationship between mindfulness, tech, fatherhood, and community. As a facilitator of slow tea experiences since 2010, he has had the privilege of curating workplace wellness immersives for teens at Spotify, IDEO, Children's Hospital Los Angeles, Terremoto, Techstars, and many more. Additionally, he brings emotional well-being and digital habits coaching to fellow parents of under 12s to help families navigate the stresses often associated with screen time. Hi, Adam. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Monica, it's great to be here.
So, I want to start in the workplace because I know that is an area of focus for you. Research shows that smartphones reduce workplace productivity even when employees aren't actively using them. So, how does smartphone distraction impact businesses?
Wow. Well, it's a good question because it's really a multi-tiered question and a multi-tiered response. On the first hand, you have the mere presence of a device, which oftentimes leads to a distraction. A distraction can be the phantom vibration, the fact that it's maybe at your workstation, if you have a workstation, whether you work in office or remote. So just the mere presence of having it in your eyesight, in your periphery, perhaps even on your person, maybe in your pocket, can and oftentimes will lead to distraction. And to piggyback on this statistic you just brought up, oftentimes the distraction itself will come with a 2 to 23 minute rebound time. So how much time is being lost to distraction or the possibility of distraction is kind of a silent epidemic in and of itself. But this isn't about like talking about hyperbole in any way. This is really about the core foundation that underlies this question, which is that whether we like it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not, you and I and everyone in the workplace, we are in a relationship with the devices that we use every day. And so how we navigate, or in most cases, how we just kind of surrender to that relationship to these devices will create these oftentimes slippery conditions for distraction or sort of offloading certain levels of thinking onto devices or the tools that we use to offload tasks. But I'm digressing a little bit.
No,
Um,
that's good. Yeah. No, I think
so
you mentioned two, I think, really important things, which was, and we talk about this all the time too, particularly when it comes to schools, which is when you said the mere presence of the device is distracting. I don't think people really understand what that means, but there have been studies that show that just the presence of it is going to, it's kind of like, I think it's Sherry Turkle said, we're forever elsewhere, right? So just knowing that we can get to it is a form of distraction. So like when we work with schools, we talk about, hey, it's in the backpack. That is not a wait for the day strategy. Like it needs to be physically separated, as well as, we talk about removing it from the nightstand, for example, right? Like just knowing it there. There's studies that say like just having it there will affect your sleep, like whether you're on it or not. So I think that's a really important thing to highlight. And then you mentioned the 23-minute statistic. We also have this in our parent eds, which is what you were referring to is if you are in a deep state of focus and you get interrupted, that it takes 23 minutes to get back into that same state of focus. It sounds crazy, but it's true. We're not talking about jumping back and forth between tasks. We're talking about if you're really focused and flowing and into a project, that is the reality. So I just wanted to highlight those couple things because they're so important.
absolutely, very important. Not to mention the fact that there's the distraction that comes from the device. Someone is sending a message, not to discredit the importance of a message or a notification, but not all notifications are created equal.
Yeah.
Let's put that right up here, and we'll come back to that later. But so not all notifications are created equal, and so there's also the sort of self-distracting mechanisms of like, oh, it's here. I want to offload my thinking for a second. Let me just check my email on this thing, or let me see. There's all of these little isms, these behaviors that we've adapted over these last, what, the iPhones just turned 18 basically.
Yeah.
So we're like just barely 18 years into this,
Hmm.
large scale experiment. So, and not all of it is bad. I'm not speaking in absolutes, but to recognize that there's uh, the initial, the point I was just making was the fact that there are the distractions that come through the device to us, right? All the push notifications and whatnot. And then there's also our own mechanisms of wanting to self-distract as a way
Yeah.
of coping with emotions or feelings or stress or
Yeah.
avoidance of a coworker or whatever it may be, right? There's no shortage of, like, actual reasons why we, sort of commit to these behaviors, but just the importance of recognizing what's happening as it's happening, or at least reflecting upon it in the immediate. That's what's important here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, awareness is always the first step. Whether or not we can manage from there, that part gets tricky, but for sure, being aware of it makes a huge difference. So, I want to ask you a little bit more about your work, which I think is so interesting. So, you facilitate screen free experiences for teams using slow tea. And so, can you explain how this works for team building in today's hyper connected, fast paced world?
Yeah. So, so my time as a UX designer, essentially, like, when the sort of UX gold rush, if you will, occurred in 2014, 2015, also happened simultaneous with becoming a first-time parent. Um, Fast forward to today, and our daughter's turning 10 next month. So uh, my time spent within tech, as a UXer, was predominantly freelance. It was freelance the whole time. So jumping in and out of contracts, mostly with startups and agencies, a lot of ad agencies, because I'm based here in LA and there's just a lot of ad revenue coming through here. So um, the background to all this is that before I got into UX, before I got in, I transitioned into tech, I've been a student of Chinese tea culture since 2009. So just now over 16 years. And I've um, really taken that passion for the culture and really imbued it, I wove it into my everyday. Um, it's how I've met some of my best people, the people that I cherish the most in my life. It's how I met my partner. We're a family now. We're parents. Tea, what I call slow tea, it's essentially an homage to, um, to Chinese tea culture, particularly what we call gongfu-cha, which is, um, I guess, loosely translated as tea with effort. So it's a tea brewing methodology and philosophy, if you will, um, to to be with tea and to be with yourself and to be with other people, in just a more balanced and slow way. And so, as a freelance UXer, I would complete these contracts. Sometimes the contracts are a crazy whirlwind, 48 hours. Sometimes they're a few weeks. Sometimes they're 6 months. Sometimes they're a year or two. And so I would observe, the culture in the workplace. And upon my observation, I would find the right moment, the right opportunity to make this offering, either in the midst of the contract or once the contract is done, and like a follow up, I would say, hey, I noticed these things that are happening in the office. I have this, call it a mindfulness experience, call it an
Hmm.
in-office retreat, whatever you want. There's many ways to describe it. Um, how would you like to experience that as a team? So it became this kind of proof of concept that started with my time at Techstars, which was really profound. And it's just been ongoing, really since 2016. And back then, we were talking about it in terms of how to pull back from the brink of burnout.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward, through the pandemic to today, now it's really about, how do we even just spend time off screens, because so much of
Yeah.
our time is now spent on screens. So that in a nutshell. is the basis of it. I can go into more stories, but
Yeah. I mean, what I'm getting, and this is sort of what I thought when I read about your work in the beginning, it just kind of creates a mechanism for slowing down, right? It's
yeah,
probably kind of difficult to do on your own nowadays, right? Especially if you're super hyper connected person. So it's almost that's the way I'm looking at it. It's almost I don't want to call it a hack. That sounds weird, but it's I guess a tool or
yeah.
like a vehicle or something like that to help
I think
people slow down.
Yeah, I think that really you hit the nail on the head there. It really is a vehicle. I mean, it is also a tool. There are these tools, within the within the template, the sort of formula, if you will, for having this tea experience, tea ceremony, whatever we want to call it. There are these tools that we use. There are these particular pots and wares, the accoutrement
Yeah.
that um, all these tools are imbued with character and personality, and there's a relationship with each one of these tools. And so we definitely can talk about it as a tool or a set of tools in order to actually reduce screen time, or just to have an experience of yourself that's not entirely mitigated by screens,
Yeah.
mediated by screens. But more importantly, to what you just said, it is a vehicle, it is a container, it is
Yeah.
like an immersive. It is an experience. Again, I kind of emphasize the in-office retreat sort of aspect of it, where I go into, an office or headquarters, and suddenly, I'll say, like, please take the opportunity to either leave your device at your workstation,
Hmm.
or if it's with you, like put it on do not disturb or airplane mode, whatever it may be. And just to have that, which might seem like an eternity, this 45-minute period of like
Yeah.
really slowing things down without it being so mechanical. It's not
Hmm.
mechanical at all. Is a really profound experience for people, especially for teams that might not really know each other so well. There's a
Yeah.
lot of room for camaraderie and moments of comfortable silence, but also like just opportunities to just like kind of laugh together, taste something together, smell something. It really touches on so many senses. It's not entirely different from, let's say, a wine tasting. Obviously, there's no real intoxicant quality to
Yeah.
what's going on here, but there is that kind of like, there is a sensuousness when we talk about, taste and smell and sight and touch, that we really tap into with slow tea.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so I wanted to pivot a little bit to this idea of minimizing tech use, which is definitely trending. And so you recently switched to a light phone. I did as well. I can tell you about my experience with it too. And this is a minimalist smartphone that is designed specifically to reduce screen time and promote intentional digital usage. So, how's it going? How's the switch going? And how can minimizing tech use improve our lives?
Yeah, this question alone, would suffice its own episode.
Yeah.
So I pre-ordered the newest model, the iPhone 3, and it's still on its way. So the post that I made, which, I guess ironically enough, I made this post on LinkedIn, and
Hmm.
it is the most uh, widespread post I've ever had on that platform. It's now
Yeah.
had, as we speak, it's had over 51,000 impressions, which to me is like really bizarre. But
Hmm.
again, it touches on something that we can touch on in an entirely separate conversation. So I'm waiting for the 3. I have a light phone 2. So this is their third model that they've come out with, and they've been,
Yeah.
as a company, they've been producing products now for a decade. So I've had the 2, and I use the 2 as an auxiliary device, which
Yeah.
sounds a bit ridiculous, but again, for some people who are like, to have like a phone away from phone, or just like have like an opportunity to, maybe on weekends or certain times of the month, or within certain situations, like if we're going out to dinner or going to a
Yeah.
comedy show or having date night, like I don't want to have the entire universe, in my
Yeah.
palm. I just want to have like a communication device that I could, be able to be reached at in case of emergency. So that's how I've related to the device. It's never really been a full-time pivot onto that device. I do intend, when it does arrive, to at least give it a shot. I know how hard it is to to break up with your phone. I mean, there's no
Mm-hmm.
other way of saying it. You know, it's not even so much about not having social media on hand, you know, like, and as soon as you unlock your device, but like having, you know, I have an Apple Card, so I use my phone for mobile
Yeah.
payments,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, all the QR codes and whatnot. Like, I'm aware of, as a tool, how useful that tool is in my life. What I strive for, again, now I'm just going to project onto what I intend to do with this device, and I want to hear your experience with it.
Yeah.
What I'm striving for, what I'm going to try and do, is to use that device as my primary device, so that I will have less of an opportunity to just lose myself. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, we turn to our smartphones or iPhones, whatever they may be, as like coping mechanisms. I just want to
Mm-hmm.
scroll to be informed, or I just want to scroll because I'm like avoiding a feeling or a
Yeah.
situation or something. I really want to show, right? So, like, again, as from one parent to another, and for all the parents, you know, who are going to be hearing this, we are models of healthy tech use to our kids,
Yeah.
which is a really tough pill to swallow at times, because
Mm-hmm.
we're not always conscientious of that. So, um, I want to get this device so that I use it in ways that are more aligned with what I intend, with my values, and so that I can project, you know, this is what a healthy relationship with a device can look like. And again, this is like something I'm just projecting. I don't know how well it's going to work for me as a primary device, but I want to pause there and bookmark that. I want to hear from you, like, how your experience is going.
Yeah. So same. I on purpose chose Light Phone 2
Mm-hmm.
as a secondary device because I knew I wouldn't be able to go full time because of what I do as a social
Yeah.
media marketer and everything else. So I knew I still needed to have a smartphone. But the way I've been using it is basically exactly like you described. So it involves a little bit of thinking before you leave the house, right? Like, do I need to scan a ticket or make a mobile payment or have a two-step verification or something on this trip out, right? So, but I actually like that because I'm already setting intention before I leave of like, I'm not going to check email while I'm out. I have my credit card. Like if I need to buy something, that's fine. So I've been using it like you, if I know I'm just driving the kids to school, or I know, like you said, going out to dinner and don't want the distractions, whatever it is. So that is the way I'm using it. I hoped I could use it more. But to your point, we are so ingrained as a society with smartphone features that's really hard. So, for example, it's not great at texting, which is good. Like, I don't want to be texting. Texting takes so much time and effort and everything else. And, it's once you send a text, you're going to get one back. Like, you get into these loops, right? So, but I do have a lot of group texts for like my kids' activities, other things. That's pretty tough to do on the light phone. So, and then obviously, like if I'm going to the airport, like I'm going to need the boarding passes, like there's things like that. And it's to me, it's just about making setting my intention and thinking before I leave the house, which is really not a big deal. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
something we always used to do. And I think we all just sort of got a little bit lazy that we don't need to plan before leaving the house. But that's the biggest difference for me, and I love the freedom of it. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll catch myself because my biggest thing, I've already taken social media off my phone a while ago, but I'm very busy, with all the things I do. So I'm constantly checking in, and I try not to. So email, things like that, right? To just make sure. But I realized like there's nothing I can do about this in this moment when I'm driving. I'll get those when I get back, right? So those are the things that I've noticed. But and I interviewed Kai from Lightphone, and we talked a lot about this extensively. I do feel the freedom of it. I do feel the, you know what, if something comes up, I can't deal with it anyway. So I'm just going to relax and focus and be mindful on what I'm
Mm,
doing. So those are the benefits for me. I do agree that Light Phone 3 will likely be a more practical switch, but my goal ultimately, and I'm pretty close, is being able to just lock my iPhone in my office, right? So I do all my iPhone stuff during the day. Maybe I take it with me if I know I need to use it, like in those instances that we talked about. But I'd love to physically be free from it. That's my goal, and I'm getting there. You know, it's
yeah,
just it does take some rearranging
yeah.
in with the way we're just set up as a society, and it's actually getting worse. Where
It
we're expected to have, you know, even in my kids' school, we now have to have like their pass to pick them up is a digital wallet thing, and I sometimes I think like, how would I do this if I didn't bring my phone with me? So yeah, that's my experience. But yeah, I don't know if you had anything else to add.
it's no, it's getting harder. I do feel like whether I choose to use it as a primary device or not, I think as a device with the ethos behind it, it will be a great first device for our daughter when we feel like that
Yeah,
time, comes.
yeah.
And which is, soon. I feel like within the next possibly, 2 years, not sooner.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm glad you brought that up. I also highly recommend it as a first device. And my son he's 12. So we finally got him an Apple Watch like very recently. That's what
Mm,
he really wanted, and we decided on it. It wasn't my first choice, but I had him sort of practice and training wheels on the light phone. So he was
mm,
able to have his number, but I was able to help teach him screen etiquette and kind of understand how texting works between him and his friends and what the etiquette is and of like, when do you text? Like, how do you reply to somebody? What's appropriate? So I was able to kind of help him with that. Um, the only thing that parents, I think, like to have is the tracking, which
hmm.
Lightphone doesn't do. That's not important to me. Like my kids are never not with an adult, you know, so I don't really need to track them. But that is the one thing. But what I love about it for a first phone is it makes it boring. You know, like
Yeah.
even the Apple Watch is not boring. You know, I'm constantly having to police like what he's doing, and he figures out workarounds, and you know, he's searching memes and all these things. Like the light phone really strips it down to making it not exciting for the kids. And
Hmm.
that's what I like the most about it compared to others. So yeah, let me know how that
Yeah.
goes if you end up doing it.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, I'll let you know. And I also like, I feel like just because we live like in the center of LA and we live in Dodger Town and we want to get, we want to give our daughter, a certain level of autonomy just because we live in like actually really walk centric neighborhood.
Yeah.
Um, so like, I'm sure there will be this kind of like push and pull between possibly, if not the light phone, possibly a watch and maybe even the
Yeah.
Apple Watch for that reason. So yeah, to be to be continued there.
Yeah. I'm going to add one more point and then we'll switch gears because, again, I
Hmm.
feel like we could talk about this forever. But I like what you just alluded to about the freedom because
Hmm.
this is something we talked a lot about with my son when he finally got it, which was okay, you're getting this, but along with this, you're getting responsibilities. So
Yes.
you're going to go to the store and pick up these groceries and come back. You know,
Yeah.
there's it's like you want to give real world responsibility along with the digital responsibility. To me,
Yeah.
that's like a really good way of handling these steps, you know. And I think
Yeah.
kids can understand it. Kids want and need freedom,
Yeah.
and I think that's the way we should look at this as
Mm.
parents, thinking about it as giving our kids real world freedom as opposed to like surveillance parenting, which is really what is mostly happening with
I
those
feel, yeah,
devices for kids.
I feel like we should have another separate just surveillance parenting
Yeah.
conversation because I feel like the one beginning of an antidote to that is just camaraderie between parents, like actual real
Yeah.
camaraderie between parents that doesn't feel transactional, that is just like, we're looking out for each other, and our kids. And so anyway,
Yeah.
that's another bookmark for something else.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Well, can I come back to focus a little bit because we touched on it in
please.
the beginning, but Our ability to focus, so this is collectively, has
Mm.
declined by 69% since 2004.
Mm.
So it was 2.5 minutes. Now it's down to 47 seconds. So, how do you think the smartphone has played a role in this decline?
Well, my first answer to that is this is a really important statistic that has to get under our skin in ways that are going to work for us as individuals and as communities, as parents, as workers or business owners, as societies. And to further expand on that statistic, which is based off of Dr. Gloria Mark's work,
Yeah.
read the book Attention Span, or at least just have it to like flip open because there's something to glean from, on every page. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about we are in a relationship with these devices. We're
Hmm.
18 years in. Sure, I was already 26 when I got my first iPhone. I already had a lot of life experience and a lot of like getting to know myself, before a smartphone. And now I'm turning 42 and it's like 18 years or 17, 18 years of an iPhone experience. I see the ways in which I've really moved a lot of these um, mechanistic ways of doing things or thinking, onto the device for better
Yeah.
and for worse. Now, for focus, again, like if we, so here's the thing, as a society with these devices, living, in a very like oversaturated media landscape, we are expected, we are provoked to respond and react all the time. There's a notification, there's a
Yeah.
social media thing, there's something to comment, to like, to love, whatever the reaction, the emoticon may be, to reshare. We're expected to do these things all the time. You get a
Yeah.
text message, you're expected to respond instantaneously. That's not
Yeah.
how historically, we worked, you
No.
know? So, because of that, and I'm not saying like that's the boogeyman and we're just going to blame everything on that. What I'm saying is because of this always on culture and the fact that we are provoked to react and respond all the time, we're doing a lot less feeling and thinking.
Hmm.
And it's very much like a grab the helm of the ship and try and always orient day to day, hour to hour, experience by experience. And it's not easy. It is so not easy. And I find myself resetting sometimes multiple times a day and just like having an embodied experience, whether it's I turn to tea, I have a cup of water, I go on a walk,
Hmm.
or I don't know, touch a Rubik's Cube, like whatever it may be. Like I kind of orient around like tactile things
Hmm.
and just like embodied experiences, breath work, that kind of stuff, maybe exercise, maybe a hike, to maybe not necessarily replenish the focus. It's not so, mechanistic in that way, but just to like stay in the body because we're constantly we're getting shocked by information, by graphic news. We then get numb to that on a
Yeah.
daily basis. It goes forward. So this is kind of a bit of a rough answer to this question, which is a really important question. But again, attempting to stay in the body to realize that the mind and the heart and the body are connected, and then there's like we need to stay connected to not just our bodies but like the world, just the environment that we live in. If you can look outside the window, what they say, if you're like stuck in an office, the old anecdote is, for every 20 minutes you stare at a screen, try and look outside the window and look at something 20 feet away for 20
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah.
There's funnier memes that go along with that, but it's uh, a lot of repetitiveness. What I'm trying to get at is that there's a lot of repetitiveness and like failing and trying again, even on a daily basis, with like just trying to reclaim focus, time, and attention. Not to suggest that it's like a war day in and day out. Sometimes it is. Yesterday in particular, my partner and I, we were like, oh, this was a really hard news day. It was
Yeah.
just, and again, we live in LA. We're 2 miles away from downtown.
Yeah.
Again, separate conversation to talk about there. It's yesterday in particular, we both just kind of came to this moment at the end of the day. We're like, this was a really, really hard news day.
Yeah.
And the beauty is that tomorrow is another day. There's always an opportunity to make a different choice, to try again, and just to stay again as embodied as humanly possible. The more we are cyborgs at this point, no doubt. But
Yeah, it's
so,
true. I mean, I'll add one thing to that, which, and this is something I've talked to many experts about, including Kai from Lightphone, actually, this idea that smartphones, in my opinion, and many others, are actually designed to take and divide our attention.
hmm,
Now, I will give Apple some credit. They have come farther with this issue with things like downtime and turning off notifications, things like that. But you do have to work to set up those settings so that
yes,
you're not getting a notification for everything. So that's the smartphone level, right? So there is intentional design decisions made to keep you picking it up. And then there's the apps, of course, right? So then, we have social media. We have every app is, if they could, would be constantly trying to pull you back in, right? So again, you have to go through effort and all the conscious work involved in turning off, minimizing, deleting. Like, I think I've mentioned this already, but I had to delete social media from my phone. I keep it on a work iPad now just to have that separation, to where if I pick up my phone for a text, I'm not going to be on Instagram 5 seconds later. Like, even knowing everything I know, all the awareness I have, I was still doing that. So I just wanted to add to that yes, everything you said is such good advice, but I also want to make sure that people can just be a little bit lighter on themselves, because these things are actively designed to work against you and take your focus,
100%,
So
100%.
I just wanted to add that.
The most recent thing I did, even to add on to your add-on, which is really important, which you can do like today, tomorrow, this weekend, this summer. And I got this from Catherine Price, who
Hmm.
is really done a lot of work in this field. I emptied my home screen. My home screen is a void. It's
Uh-huh.
like looking at like a body of water.
Yep.
I've emptied the home screen so that it forces me, again, whether I'm coming to the phone intentionally or not, sometimes it's not the case. But
Yeah.
I unlock my phone, then I'm like, it's just empty. It's just like it's not even a mirror. It's just like looking into a pond. And I'm like, wait, why am I here? What did I
Yep.
come here for? And then I search, or like there's, in the latest iOS, there's like just a tiny search bar towards the bottom. So you search, I'm here because I need to email so and so, or
Yep.
or even I'm gonna go to so and so platform to see if so and so wrote me a message, whatever it may be. It's just
Yep.
another point of friction
Yes.
to elicit intention and to stay as mindful as possible. It's actually been really, really profoundly helpful for me to not
Yeah.
just have this whole suite. Even even before I did this, I had all my apps organized.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like astrologically, I'm like a Virgo rising, so like for me, there's like a lot of order and perfection that's important to me, and so like I had all my apps organized in folders. I don't do swiping, home screen to like
Yeah.
find stuff. But even that, just to empty it all out, to go tabula
Yep.
rasa, clean slate, to have this empty home screen has been profoundly helpful for me. And helpful for a lot of
That
people, I think.
That's such a good tip. I actually haven't read that one specifically, but I love that you brought up friction, which is actually a huge thing that I've been talking to other experts about. I just recently interviewed David from OneSec. I don't know if you're familiar with that app. There's several
Part of one sec,
apps
yeah.
that do this for you, where they will force you to slow down a little bit. And
Mm,
back to what you were saying earlier about how new the iPhone is. I'm Gen X, so I'm old enough to have grown up with nothing, but young enough to have completely adapted to it. But I literally remember the friction that was already there, right? And then as things got better, and I don't think that designers did this on purpose. I think they did this to give us a better experience. But now everything's so easy, so readily accessible, and so highly reinforcing that it's really, really hard. But like I was just thinking, I mentioned to David in that interview about like dial up, which I know it's like makes me sound 100 years old, but I'm going to say it anyway. Just the idea of having to wait for your browser to load up is some friction, and it slows you down. It kind of goes back to the tea we were talking about, right? It just sort of forces those moments of calm and intentionalness that has been completely removed, with user experience design nowadays.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
friction is super important. And that back to Light Phone too, that's what they do in a way, is they make it boring. And yeah, texting is not super easy, right? Because we don't want to be texting back and forth all day. We want to make phone calls and connect with people. So
Yeah.
yeah, friction.
If I could remove one thing forever, I would personally, for me, I would remove texting.
Yeah.
I think it really, I think texting like kills like slowly
Yeah.
asphyxiates
It's
relationship. It's
it's been driving me crazy lately, like just
yeah.
volume and how often, and then I'll lose things.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
agree. It goes back to like John Haight's work about communication, the best type of communication being synchronous. In other
Hmm.
words, like I'm talking to you, you're replying right back to me. There's so much that's lost in, I'm going to send you a message and then I'm going to wait 4 hours for you to reply. And not only is it frustrating form of communication, but it just takes that humanity out. And it's so, I don't know if you heard, the Sherry Turkle was on a panel. It was for Center for Humane Technology
Oh, I was
recently.
just talking about that I just sent that episode
Yeah, I
to a
thought that
friend.
was so good. And she said
Phenomenal.
something like, and this is along the lines of what we're talking about. She said something like, for a long time, humans spoke to humans.
Hmm.
Then we spoke through machines, right? So that's what
Hmm.
we're talking about with the texting. It sort of filters that out. So now we're having to communicate through a machine. And now we're going to be speaking to machines with AI. And I just thought that was such a simple way of looking at it. I mean, it's also chilling to me because of we started this conversation with this idea of humanity, like before we started recording, and how that's so important to both of us is maintaining humanity. But yeah, I mean, texting just feels so cold to me in so many ways, even with the emojis and everything else. And then there's just that disconnect of time, which I think is a really important thing to think about, where a conversation is just in the moment is so much stronger in terms of human connection. So
It's the further asynchronization of everything
yeah,
that
yeah,
just feels more inhumane.
yeah.
And I love that you mentioned that particular episode because it's super important. Not to mention also like the work that Esther Perel does in talking about her version of AI, which is artificial intimacy, which again, that's a
Hmm.
whole separate
Yeah.
conversation to have. But like, um, I love the work of Yuval Harari and what he talks
Hmm.
about when it comes to humanity's relationship with tech. He's saying, one thing we can do is that for every interaction we have with AI, have an equal interaction with a human being, which
Okay.
again sounds innocuous. It's actually really hard to do. And again,
Yeah.
it's not like that's the answer to everything. It's just some way. It's one way, one attempt to stay human, because so much of what you just said, like many conversations are just being rerouted through chatbots because they were more validating than people. They're always available. They don't talk about themselves. Like there's no they there.
Yeah.
That's like the biggest thing to remember. And we forget, chatbots are not new. OpenAI didn't invent them. Um, what's the first chatbot that came out in the 1960s that already proved, the point even back then?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not sure, but I know
so
what you're talking about.
yeah, it's one attempt, right? For every interaction we have with a chatbot, have an equal interaction with a fellow human being, which again
Yeah.
sounds ridiculous, almost innocuous, but it could be one way of like, keeping both feet on the ground.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good tip. I haven't even heard that one, but that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I want to ask you about one more thing,
Mhm.
which is about a flow state. And I cannot pronounce his name. I think you'll know who I'm talking about. He was kind of one of the fathers of positive psychology. He has a really difficult name. But anyway, he was the one that coined this idea of a flow state, which
Mm,
is like a deep form of human attention. And so the more flow you experience, the better you feel, actually.
mm.
So, how do you think screen activities have affected flow? And how can humans regain this essential state of being?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm going to give you a two-pronged answer, and I'm going to try and be brief.
Yeah.
One way in which it's increased a flow state for me personally. So way back in the day, back in 2012, before I got into UX, I started to create digital art through my iPhone 4, which is a really tiny canvas if you look at
Yeah.
the statics of it. I found a way using creative art apps to manipulate photos with app-based assets like an Illustrator style workflow.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up presenting that work in installations. A couple pieces became like album covers. I'll send you some of that information, some of those examples, after this conversation. I ended up getting in touch with the creator of these apps. It's actually a company called Pixite, who are
Okay.
based down in San Diego, and they make these art apps. They still make them today. Um, I got in touch with who was their creative director at the time, and I said, "What is this that I'm experiencing? I can go into this 2 hour zone, not of
Yeah.
distraction, but of like just exploration and this
Mm-hmm.
tactile form of making art. And what is that?" And so that's how I stumbled into what I understood was user experience
Mm-hmm.
through that flow state experience of using
Yeah.
these art apps to as a form of self-expression. So are there ways in which tech can induce a flow state? Yes. There
Mm-hmm.
are there are types of beats or music to activate certain brain states like alpha state. Um, there are apps that also use the vibration, the haptics on the phone that can also induce these states as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's just the fact that you can put on an audiobook or a podcast. You're not staring at the device, it's sort of out of sight, but you may be
Yeah.
listening in earbuds or in the background, and then you're just listening to the conversation while you're maybe doing something else, and just you can kind of go into time that way. So that's that's the positives.
Yeah.
That's the positive prong answer to that question. And so
Mm-hmm.
the inverse to that is, um, again, from the interruption,
Yeah.
distraction, uh, constant search for dopamine or even
Yeah.
serotonin, like that kind of pleasure receptor that we want to always activate. It could be really detrimental to flow state. You could be having a conversation at a table face to face with someone, but your device is there. And so what are we doing? We're fubbing each other. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they're fubbing us. We're fubbing them. Fubbing is this funny term
Yeah.
we use in the vernacular, which is a blend of phone and snubbing. So
Yeah.
it's fubbing, which is essentially like, it sounds so silly because it's something that is done everyone's doing it all the time, whether it's in the cafe, on a date, in the museum, like wherever we are, we're just there. Um, so that could be really detrimental to flow state as well, just being engaged either in a conversation or in just a mindful meal, even just
Yeah.
like a mindful glass of water. Like I have this raw pour tea that I brewed on ice because it's nice and warm here in LA. I just wanted to have it with me throughout this conversation, and the flavors and the tannins of this tea and the fact that I brewed it before this conversation is just keeping me grounded.
Mm-hmm.
You know so um I don't know if this is a really good answer to this question, but again, it's there's positives and there's negatives. Being so tapped in, so reactive and responsive can be really detrimental to flow state. And then
Yeah.
there's like, you find like a coloring app and you can just be so engaged in that for 2 hours. It could be really therapeutic. You know,
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge the positives as well as I acknowledge the negatives. But I think because I'm not Gen X, I guess I'm an elder millennial. But I also remember, like, again, dial up and all the
Yeah.
things, and so I'm a bit more old school, and I'm also a musician. And so like I want to focus on like these tactile, touch based things. Maybe it's pottery, maybe it's drawing, maybe it's playing an instrument, maybe it's pouring tea and using your fingers and your hands and your digits. So those things, even something as simple as a walk, can engage a flow state. Again, a walk
Yeah.
that you're not interrupting yourself with
Right.
looking for information. You have to be aware. Like sometimes I tell a coaching client or like a group call that I'm on, if you want to have a really profound experience, go for a walk for 15 minutes, but leave your phone behind.
Yeah.
Watch how profound of an experience that can be, where
Yeah.
you notice a house, a color, a flower, a tree, what someone's wearing. Like even that alone can really induce a flow state. So
Yeah.
that's a very windy downlaner
No,
answer to the question, but yeah.
I get it. And it's interesting. So I love that you spent some time talking about how tech is not inherently bad. Like we try
Mm,
to do that all the time.
mm,
Because it's not the phone. It's what are you doing on the phone, right?
yeah.
And to your point, yeah, there's some amazing apps like the one you described that can be incredibly beneficial, right? But I think to me, if I had to say one thing about this topic, I would say that screen activities, so whether it's video games, smartphone apps like social media, whatever it is, they kind of take away the gift of boredom. And this is
Mm,
something that um, is talked about a lot when they talk about flow state, because you kind of have to have a bit of boredom to get into that state. And we sort of rob ourselves of that with the way that we're interacting with technology right now. And that's interesting that you talked about music, because that's one of the examples that they give for flow state is getting into whatever it is you're doing, the guitar, I don't know, and losing yourself, right, in the time that you spent doing it. Like that is a really good way to think about flow state. And like I set it up in the beginning, this is something that humans need as for well-being. Like it's so important. And it kind of goes back to, I think, what you're trying to do with the tea as well. It's team building, but you're also kind of trying to give that sense of mindfulness. So it's a really interesting topic. But yeah, I'm glad that you talked about, hey, yeah, I've been able to find my own flow state through an app. Like that's awesome that you could do that, right? It doesn't all have to be bad. So, but I think the themes keep coming back to distraction, mindfulness, right? Those are the things that I think keep coming up. Um, so go ahead.
no. It's like those terms and concepts are important, and they're still kind of beyond our reach
Yeah.
in the sort of day to day. If even the term like well being or wellness or mindfulness is kind of feels like beyond accessible. Which again, like even that alone, that alone also is a separate conversation to be had.
Yeah.
But again, it's finding ways to make it really pragmatic, really embodied, like a glass of water, a meal, like keeping the phones away from the table, like,
Yeah.
having these phone free zones. It's
Yeah.
a really fun way and a way in which an entire family can be involved in holding each other accountable and sort of keeping things playful and experimental, because there are no rules here. Everything is changing too quickly, but there are ways in which we can play and experiment and sort of, sway. When a storm comes, the tree just sways, like goes with the wind, right? And a branch might break. And so, when I talk about two fellow parents, we talk about like, we don't talk about in terms of like hard rules, but the fact that things can remain experimental and playful and, staying open-minded about things. So That's my final addendum to that.
That's awesome. I actually think that's a really good place to end it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. And this has been so interesting to me. I love talking about the little bit more ethereal parts of this conversation, honestly. And I learned a lot. You gave me a couple good tips. I'm going to try the removing the apps from the homepage. I think that's a really good, simple thing to do. So love that. And I just think what your approach, what you're doing with in the workplace is really cool. And yeah, I think I keep up the great work, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.